A chance encounter between a cold businessman and a weary hotel clerk sparks a shocking revelation. They might be long-lost siblings. As secrets unfold, they must navigate their past and rebuild a bond they never knew existed. The hotel lobby buzzed with the usual chaos of a busy Friday evening. Business travelers hurried to check in, and families wrangled tired children as they waited for their room keys. Among the crowd, a man dressed in an expensive tailored suit strode in with an air of superiority. His name was James Ashton, a wealthy entrepreneur known for his no-nonsense attitude and sharp tongue. Behind the reception desk stood Clara, a young woman in her late 20s. She had worked at the hotel for 5 years, handling long hours and difficult guests with a patient smile. Tonight, however, she was exhausted. Her shift had been relentless, and she hadn't had a moment to catch her breath. James approached the desk, tapping impatiently on the counter. "Excuse me," he said, his tone curt. "I booked a suite for tonight, and I expect everything to be perfect. I don't have time for any incompetence." Clara took a deep breath and mustered her professional smile. "Of course, sir. Let me check your reservation." But as she navigated the system, James's impatience grew. "Is it that hard to find a reservation? This is supposed to be a 5-star hotel." Clara's cheeks flushed, but she kept her composure. "I apologize for the delay. Here it is, the executive suite on the top floor. I'll have someone escort you." "No need," James interrupted, snatching the key card from her hand. "I'll find it myself. Just make sure my luggage is delivered promptly." As he turned to leave, Clara felt a pang of frustration but swallowed her pride. Guests like him were part of the job, and she couldn't afford to let it get to her. The next morning, Clara's shift started early. She was surprised when James appeared at the desk again, this time looking slightly less polished. His tie was loosened, and his expression seemed more distracted than arrogant. His usual air of superiority was replaced by something else, a subtle heaviness that caught her attention. "I need directions to the local cemetery," he said abruptly, his voice quieter than before. Clara blinked, caught off guard by the unexpected request. "Of course, sir. Is there someone you'd like to visit?" He hesitated for a moment, looking down as if the question carried a weight he wasn't ready to share. Then, with a sigh, he answered, "My mother. She passed away years ago. I haven't been back here since." The blunt admission took Clara by surprise. Something in his tone, a mixture of sadness and regret, softened her lingering annoyance from the previous day. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said gently, her voice laced with genuine empathy. "The cemetery is just a short drive away. I can write down the directions for you." She grabbed a notepad and began writing, her hands moving instinctively while her mind raced. The vulnerability in his voice reminded her of something, though she couldn't quite place it. As she handed him the note, their eyes met for a brief moment. Clara felt a strange sense of familiarity, like looking at a photograph she couldn't remember taking. She shook the thought away, brushing it off as her imagination. "Thank you," James said quietly, his usual sharpness replaced by an almost awkward gratitude. Without another word, he pocketed the note and walked away, his shoulders slightly hunched as if carrying an invisible burden. The rest of Clara's day was uneventful, but the encounter lingered in her mind. Later that evening, as she tidied the lounge, she heard a voice coming from the corner. Glancing up, she realized it was James, speaking on his phone. He was seated in one of the leather armchairs, his posture relaxed yet somber. "I visited Mom today," he said, his voice low and tinged with emotion. "It's been so long. I thought I'd feel some kind of closure, but instead, I just feel empty. I can't stop thinking about how she always said we'd find her. But after all these years, it feels impossible." Clara froze mid-step, her heart pounding. The words struck a chord deep within her, triggering a memory she hadn't thought of in years. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, gentle but resolute. "You have a brother out there, Clara. I know it. One day, we'll find him." Her breath caught in her throat as the realization began to take shape. Could it be? Was James's mother the same woman her mother had spoken of? The idea seemed too far-fetched to be true, but the uncanny sense of familiarity she'd felt earlier now made her wonder if it was more than just coincidence. She stood there, rooted to the spot, as James ended his call and leaned back in his chair, lost in thought. The lounge fell silent, but Clara's mind buzzed with questions. She couldn't ignore the possibility, no matter how improbable it seemed. She needed to know the truth. The thought haunted Clara through the night, keeping her awake long after her shift had ended. Every detail of her interactions with James replayed in her mind, fueling a growing certainty that demanded answers. As soon as she got home, she pulled out the old wooden box of keepsakes her mother had left her. The hinges creaked as she opened it, revealing a treasure trove of faded photographs, handwritten letters, and small trinkets. Her fingers trembled as she sifted through the items, searching for the one piece of evidence that could confirm her suspicions. Finally, she found it. A birth certificate, yellowed with age. Her eyes scanned the details, her heart pounding as she read the name, James. Born in the same small town just a few years before her own birth. Clara clutched the paper tightly, her mind reeling. Could the demanding, aloof guest upstairs truly be the brother she had never met? Her mother had spoken of him often, describing a baby boy who had been taken away under circumstances she'd never fully explained. And now, all these years later, he might be here, just a few steps away. The next morning, Clara arrived at the hotel with a mix of anticipation and dread. She spotted James in the lobby, standing near the grand staircase and scrolling through his phone. Summoning every ounce of courage, she approached him. "Mr. Ashton, can I speak with you privately?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions within her. James raised an eyebrow, his expression skeptical but curious. "All right," he said, tucking his phone into his pocket. He followed her to a quiet corner of the lounge, where they sat across from each other. Clara took a deep breath, her hands gripping the edges of her chair. "I overheard you talking about your mother yesterday," she began, her voice soft but determined. I think we might be related." James's brows furrowed, his demeanor shifting from casual curiosity to cautious disbelief. "What are you talking about?" Clara reached into her bag and pulled out the birth certificate, along with an old photograph of a baby boy with piercing blue eyes. She placed them on the table between them, her heart hammering in her chest. "My mother always told me she had a son who was taken from her when he was just a baby. She never stopped searching for him. This is her box of keepsakes, and this birth certificate has your name." James stared at the items, his face pale and unreadable. He picked up the photograph, his hands shaking slightly as he examined it. This can't be," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "My mother told me I had a sister, but I never believed it." Clara's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking as she spoke. "I think it's true. I think you're my brother." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of the revelation hung in the air, thick with unspoken emotions. James set the photograph down carefully, his gaze meeting Clara's. "If this is true, then I've spent my whole life not knowing something that should have meant everything." Clara reached across the table, her hand resting on his. "We can't change the past, but we can figure out the future, together." The two spent hours talking, piecing together their shared past. James's adoptive parents had moved him to another state when he was a child, and he'd grown up believing he had no other family. Meanwhile, Clara's mother had spent years searching for him, never giving up hope. As they shared their stories, the weight of the years apart became more and more apparent. James leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "She told me. My mother, I mean. She always said there was a part of my story I didn't know. I thought it was just something she said to make me feel better when I was struggling. But now—" His voice trailed off, and he looked down at his hands, uncharacteristically unsure of himself. Clara studied him, her heart aching for the little boy who had grown up so far away from the family that loved him. "It must have been so hard," she said gently, "to grow up feeling like something was missing and not knowing what it was." James nodded slowly. "I buried it. Pushed it away. I told myself that it didn't matter, that it wouldn't change anything. But now that I'm here, talking to you, it's like everything's unraveling. And I don't even know where to start." Clara reached out, placing her hand over his. "You don't have to figure it all out right now. We've already lost so much time. Let's not waste any more. We'll figure it out together." James looked up, his piercing blue eyes meeting hers. For the first time, the walls he had built around himself seemed to crack, revealing a vulnerability he had hidden for so long. "I don't deserve this," he murmured. "I've been so focused on my career, on building my life, that I've hurt people along the way. And now I find out I had a sister all along, a sister I treated terribly." Clara gave him a small, sad smile. "We can't change the past, James, but we can choose what we do with the time we have now, and I'm not going to let you push me away just because you think you don't deserve it. We're family, that's what matters." Tears welled up in James's eyes, and he quickly wiped them away, embarrassed. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "I've never been good at opening up." Clara chuckled softly. "Neither have I, but maybe we can learn together. One step at a time." They continued talking late into the evening, sharing memories of their mother and their separate lives. Clara told James about the nights their mother would sit by the window, whispering prayers that her son would find his way back to her. James shared stories of his adoptive parents, who had given him a good life, but could never fill the void he hadn't understood until now. By the time they parted ways, something had shifted between them. The icy tension that had once defined their interactions was gone, replaced by a fragile but genuine connection. For the first time in years, James felt a sense of belonging he hadn't realized he was missing. In the weeks that followed, James decided to extend his stay at the hotel. It was no longer about luxury or convenience. It was about reconnecting with the sister he never knew he had. Clara, too, found herself drawn to these moments, carving out time from her busy schedule to sit and talk with him whenever she could. They would often meet in quiet corners of the hotel, the rooftop garden, the lounge after hours, or even the tiny staff break room when Clara was on a quick pause. Each conversation brought new revelations about their lives. James spoke about the challenges of his high-powered career, admitting how often he'd pushed people away in his relentless pursuit of success. Clara shared stories of her childhood, her dreams of becoming an artist that had been set aside to take care of her mother, and the ache of growing up with a missing piece of her family. One evening, they sat together under the soft glow of the rooftop garden's string lights. The air was warm, carrying the faint scent of lavender from the potted plants Clara had tended to herself. James leaned forward, his hands clasped together as if bracing himself for something difficult. "I've spent my life building this empire," he began, his voice quieter than usual. "I thought money and success would be enough, but it's not. None of it matters if there's no one to share it with. I want to make things right, not just with you, but with everyone I've pushed away." Clara looked at him, her eyes brimming with tears. She reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "You've already taken the first step, James. You're here, and you're trying. That's what matters." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I want to do more, though. I want to know everything about you, Clara. About Mom. I want to visit her grave again. With you this time." Clara's voice wavered as she replied. She would have been so happy to see this, to see us together. They sat there in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared loss hanging between them. But alongside the sorrow was something new, a fragile but growing hope. James surprised her the next morning by showing up at the staff room with 2 cups of coffee and a folder. "What's this?" Clara asked, taking the cup he handed her. "It's for you," James said, his tone almost shy. "I did some digging and found a small gallery downtown that's hosting a showcase for emerging artists. I know you gave up painting, but maybe it's time to start again." Clara stared at him, her heart swelling with emotion. She hadn't picked up a paintbrush in years, but James's gesture reminded her that it wasn't too late to dream again. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't even know what to say." "Say you'll think about it," James replied, with a soft smile. Their reunion became a turning point for both of them. Clara began to rediscover her passion for art, with James cheering her on at every step. James, in turn, started reaching out to the people he'd alienated over the years. Old friends, colleagues, even his adoptive parents, whom he hadn't spoken to in years. Their journey wasn't without challenges. There were moments of doubt, misunderstandings, and old wounds that took time to heal. But through it all, they had each other. Their bond was a testament to the resilience of family, the power of forgiveness, and the hope that even the most broken relationships could be mended. For James and Clara, this wasn't just a reunion. It was the beginning of a future filled with love, understanding, and the unshakable promise that they would never lose each other again. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this story. If it touched your heart or made you reflect on the importance of family and second chances, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Your feedback means the world to us. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. It really helps us reach more people. And if you believe this story could inspire someone else, share it with your friends and family. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next heartwarming tale. Thank you for being part of our journey. Your support keeps us going and helps us create meaningful stories for you.